Hello, here I am again, and I want you to think about this. I really want you to think about this. And I'm going to do something today that I don't do. I don't like to see it done or hear it done, but I'm going to sink to that level today because I think it's very necessary that I say it this way so that it would have the effect that I'm looking for, so that you will think about this. So what I want to talk about is the hearing for the January 6th riot at the Capitol. Now I have to have a disclaimer here because I did not watch the hearing. I saw a couple of inserts on the internet Tuesday night as I was doing some computer things. At any rate, what I saw, I'm glad I didn't see the hearing. Now, the reason I was saying I was going to say things is because you all know that have seen or heard me before that I am an ex-police officer, Los Angeles Police Department. And what I saw Tuesday night of these Capitol Police, I think they need to change the name or the title of their employment because they are not police officers. Let me say that again. They are not police officers. Now, some of them are probably really good guys and some of them are probably really serious about doing the jobs. But the 4 or 5 that they showed the inserts of in this hearing, they're not police officers. They can't be. They have none of the attributes of a law enforcement officer. Now, there was a movie called A League of Their Own where Tom Hanks looked at one of the female baseball players and said, "Are you crying? There's no crying in baseball." Well, these guys were crying on the stand, plus they read verbatim every word that they said. And in a real police department, you don't read your testimony. If you need to refresh your memory, you say, "Can I refresh my memory by looking at my notes?" And then you look at your notes, refresh your memory, and then you go back to testifying. These guys read every word that they said, and then they cried. This is ridiculous. But another thing that I wanted to say, that the shooting at the Capitol that day, that I didn't hear him say anything about that, but that shooting at that Capitol was so far out of policy for any police department that I have knowledge of in this country. You do not shoot an unarmed suspect for breaching a barricade. A person who is non-threatening going through a barricade and you just shoot them. That is out of policy. Any police department in the world, you would be fired and charges would be brought up against you. But speaking of that, it brought something else to mind. I don't even remember the year. I think it may have been 2015 or 14. But there was another Capitol Police shooting that to me raised every hair on the back of my neck, because there was a young woman named Miriam Carey. I think you should look this one up, Miriam Carey, because nobody heard about this. She was shot in the back of the head, in her vehicle. Again, no police department in this country advocates shooting at fleeing vehicles. So she had to be fleeing because the bullets went through the back. Now this woman was shot in the back of the head in her vehicle driving away. Her daughter, who was an infant, a year and a half or 2 years old, was in her car seat properly strapped in the back seat. So those bullets had to zip past that child to hit the woman in the back of the head. Now that to me, again, was way out of policy, and I thought then, who is this police department? What is this police department? That nothing happened. And at the same time, the regular citizens was burning cities down because police was shooting black criminals. I mean, criminals. People who were resisting arrest, fighting the police, and the police ended up having to shoot them, and the citizenry burned the neighborhoods down. But this was a black woman shot by a Capitol Police officer. Again, don't know who he was. He could have been a Martian. But we don't know whether he was black or white, but will assume that he was a white police officer, shot a black female in the back of the head, and there was not a match struck. So nothing burned, nobody said anything. But this tells me that there's something about that police department that is different from every other police department in the world, because here they are with two bad shootings, and both of them female. That's another thing. They just shoot women, seem like. What's up with that? And nothing is said about it. The community don't flare up. Nobody protests. Nobody says anything. There is something sinister about this department. And I don't think they ought to be called police. They ought to be called babysitters or something, because they're in that building. And the way these guys were testifying and talking Tuesday, they were trying to hurt us. Well, that's what criminals do. They try to hurt people. But they have not been in a real riot, because that January 6th Capitol riot was child's play compared to the riots that was going on the streets. Apparently, they don't know nothing about Portland or Philadelphia or the LA riots, where people were throwing Molotov cocktails and balls with ice, bricks, and everything else at the police. None of that happened to these guys. People just walked toward them, and they shot one, and now they're trying to kill us. They're trying to hurt us. And it's just something that I thought I should say. And the next thing I should say, hopefully I didn't confuse you, but this is troubling to me, and it is weighing heavy. Policemen don't cry. Well, we cry, yes we do. We shouldn't say we don't cry. We cry, but we don't cry about things that takes place on the job. We expect those kind of things to happen to us. Every morning when you get up and suit up and get out there, you expect something unusual to happen, because it's not a mundane day-to-day job. There's something new every day and different circumstances. So these guys are pitiful excuses for police officers. And one more thing I want to say before I go is, I have seen the Democratic Party for what they are, and it is appalling. The Democratic Party is not for the people. They can't be for the people. Speaking of crying, I go back to when Donald Trump was the president, and he restricted the Muslims from coming to America until he sorted out something. I don't remember what he was restricting them for, but at any rate, he restricted the Muslim from coming. And Chuck Schumer got on the floor and cried over that. Said, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, not letting these people come. Apparently, he doesn't go back to his constituents. He's a New York senator. And people are dying on the streets of New York every day, the people that he represents. And he doesn't shed a tear, and he hasn't said anything about that. But he cried because Donald Trump would not allow the Muslims to come into this country. Now, I go back there because I'm seeing that same mentality today, that the Democratic Party wants the American people to get vaccinated and wear a mask and social distance and don't go to work and do all of these things, but they have opened the border up for anybody who wants to come. Now you think about that. You, as an American citizen, has to get vaccinated or a mask. Are they talking about barring you from going to work, barring you from going to restaurants, and doing all of these things. And yet they're filling the country up with people who are coming from countries. Some of those countries don't even have doctors. There's no medicine to treat them, and they're coming with whatever they're bringing in the country, COVID and smallpox or yellow fever or whatever they may have contracted. They're bringing it in, and nobody is saying a word about it. Thousands a day come across the border. But you have to go and get a vaccination and wear your mask. And I love the way they explain the vaccination. Take the vaccination because it is safe and effective. Oh, but you better have your mask on. Well, if it is safe and effective, then you don't need the mask. I mean, this is logical stuff for a fifth grader. And they are imposing it on the American people as if that it is science and truth. It cannot be safe and effective if you still have to wear the mask. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. So I'm just saying, we are going to have to stop and start thinking about these things. And this is why I like to say, think about this. You have to, because if you just listen and run willy-nilly, I'm telling you, next year this time, they'll have you standing on your head so that your blood don't settle in your feet, you know? If you keep walking around, all your blood's going to go to your feet. So you got to stand on your head 3 times a day. These people are not suitable for leadership. That's all I got to say. And that's why I don't like to go into that name calling and making broad statements. But I think it's necessary so that you get the attention that these people are not qualified to lead anybody anywhere with that mentality. So God bless. God loves you, and keep seeking God, because that is the only way and the only place that you're going to find solitude.